to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm assuming by the empty room that there is no public comment. So we will move right into community announcements. If you want to start, and we don't have either of our student
No.
reps tonight. Exams, I'm assuming.
No, band and other commitments.
So, does anybody have anything that they'd like to announce? Ted? Welcome back.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you here.
Thank you. Obviously, I've been absent for a period of time due to an illness, and I'd really like to thank my family, my coworkers, the people at this table, members of the Board of Selectmen and other boards, and the staff of the district, and the community of Swampscott for being so supportive for a long period of time. To be remorseful, I didn't thank my daughters at Mass General as well. To be here and full of energy and ready to move on.
Good to hear. Do you,
Do you want to announce this? Call that first.
And the Swampscott Police Association is hosting the holiday parade December 16th at 5:30. It's an annual event. We also participate with Toys for Local Children. The parade route traverses through almost all the parts of Swampscott. People are encouraged to donate a toy to Toys for Local Children and Kathy Calpin's group. And it ends at the monument where Danielle Strauss and the Town Recreation Department are hosting family events. So hopefully the weather will cooperate and we'll get a great turnout for TLC.
that coincides with the gingerbread event, right?
Oh, yeah, they're gonna, no, the judging, we have a few more days. You can get your gingerbread in now still, and there's a few more days after the 16th till the judging happens. I think it might happen on the 19th. I don't know why that date sticks in my mind, but I did drop gingerbread house off this morning.
And if you can't make the parade, can you drop toys off at the police department?
You can.
Awesome.
Anybody? Cardi, anything?
I had a comment. I was hoping that maybe in the start of the new year, we could maybe try to revive our look for the love of learning stuff. Or I don't know if that's what it was ended up calling it, or for the love of,
It was for the love of
for the
learning.
love of learning, to see if maybe that would be a possibility in the new year.
Oh, yeah, that was,
Students
that
to
was
come,
good.
or even do the pledge, and where we had the little elementary students come through and do the pledge and the,
Statement.
the,
Mission?
yeah, the mission statement.
I mean, even if we can't, I think, even if we can't get some kids in here to do the floor level learning, it'd be nice to highlight teachers who are doing some great things in our district. I mean, there's so many of them. It'd be nice to just, even if we could read something off or have a student come in and tell us what a teacher's doing.
So why don't we add that as a specific agenda item going forward? Maybe after community announcements before the superintendent report?
We can certainly work on that.
And I think, obviously, if there isn't something particular, I don't want it to be a task, but I know that there is a lot that we should be highlighting. Okay, so let's move right into our superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Tenley Seidel, one of our student representatives, was unable to make it tonight, so we have postponed the presentation of her Certificate of Academic Excellence to February, as she's also unable to make the January date. So moving on, I would like to talk about the North Shore Education Consortium's Articles of Agreement Amendment. So we had a board meeting last week, and in your packets, you have their Articles of Agreement, but you also have, so it is under the NEC Articles of Agreement, What the amendment is for is to expand the membership of the NEC by adding Ipswich into the member districts. So currently, the member districts are Beverly, Boxford, Danvers, Gloucester, Hamilton, Wenham, Lynn, Lynnfield, Manchester, Essex Regional, Marblehead, Masconomet, Middleton, Nahat, North Reading, Peabody, Reading, Rockport, Salem, Swampscott, Topsfield, and Triton Regional. And so by adding an Ipswich, we would have 21 members, and it would replace the Articles of Agreement approved on June 23rd, 2016. And what the consortium needs is a vote of 2/3 of school committee members, or school committees. So I am looking for a vote to approve the amendment of these articles in order to include Ipswich as a member district.
Can I ask a question?
Sure enough.
Why wouldn't we approve something like that? I know that to some degree that this is, sort of standard, but aren't there, why wouldn't we?
The board, made up of all of these superintendents, has already recommended it, but as a school committee who is a member district, you have the right to vote. There's no reason you wouldn't. They have students attending the programs at NEC, and they used to belong to a different collaborative, but because their student population seems to be over at the North Shore Consortium, it makes the most sense for them to join that collaborative.
Does it change anything about what we pay or what?
It doesn't
It
change
doesn't change
anything. It doesn't change
substantially for-
anything in terms of tuition payments that we make. Basically, it makes it,
It won't be harder for us to put kids there because they'll have
nope,
capacity
they're
issues.
already there. It's just a formality. What it does mean is that we have, what happens at these board meetings, especially when I first started going, it's really difficult to get a quorum to run a board meeting. I will say that the current superintendents leading these districts, for the most part, there's 18 or 19 in attendance at every one of the board meetings. So when Ipswich comes on board, their new superintendent has been made aware that he really does need to participate in the board meetings and be there to vote on the issues. It doesn't change tuition. It doesn't change our ability to place students in their programs. They're already there. It's just making it a formal, them formally a member of the North Shore Education Consortium.
All right, so I will entertain a vote. Anybody want to move?
So I'll make a motion that we allow Ipswich to join the consortium. Is there some language that I should be reading?
Or that we approve
I'm
the
trying-
agreement as written?
So the proposed amendment of the North Shore Education Consortium Articles of Agreement has been reviewed and approved by a duly authorized vote at a public meeting held by the school committee. This amendment serves to add Ipswich as a member district. I don't know if that's the language
So
you actually
just make a
want.
motion to approve adding Ipswich as a member district of the North Shore
Perfect.
Consortium.
I'll second.
Okay.
Look
all
at you
in-
back with official business.
All in favor? Motion approved. Thank you.
And I have an item that I would like to ask permission to add to my report. I would like permission of the chair to add one item.
You have my permission.
Thank you. So today was a big day for us here in Swampscott. We were invited to the MSBA board meeting to witness our invitation vote into the eligibility period for a new building project, a new school project. I want to thank Suzanne Wright, Amy O'Connor, Peter Spelios, and Sean Fitzgerald for attending with me. We were one of 15 districts that they voted to invite into the eligibility period. And I would like to read a little bit from a letter that we just received this afternoon after the board meeting. I am pleased to report that the Massachusetts School Building Authority Board of Directors voted to invite the statement of interest for the Hadley Elementary School in the town of Swampscott into the MSBA's eligibility period. The 270-day eligibility period formalizes and streamlines the beginning of the MSBA's grant approval process and benefits the town by providing a definitive schedule for the completion of preliminary requirements, assisting with the determination of financial and community readiness, and identifying needs for planning and budgeting. Successful completion of all activities in the eligibility period will allow the town to be eligible for an MSBA invitation to the feasibility study. Invitation into the eligibility period is not an invitation into the feasibility study. Moving forward, the MSBA's process requires collaboration with the MSBA, and an invitation to the feasibility study will require a further vote of the MSBA Board of Directors. The town's eligibility period will commence on June 1st, 2018, and conclude on February 26, 2019. During this time, the town must complete the preliminary requirements in accordance with the schedule on page 3. I do have that schedule and timeline. Basically, this is the first step in moving forward towards any new building project. It is a 270-day period. We have a variety of steps we have to take within that eligibility period. For example, we have compliance certification. We have to form a school building committee. There's an educational profile questionnaire, which I can begin working on now. But the first step for our town would be at town meeting on May 21st to vote for an appropriation to move forward into the feasibility study. I just lost my train of thought completely. Oh, in the meantime, one of the things that our district has committed to as a result of the senior study walkthrough with the MSBA board and their architects is that we will be submitting statement of interest for both Clark and Stanley in their next period that opens January 5th and it goes through April. So although we don't start our eligibility period till June 1st, we have a lot of work to do. We need to submit 2 more statement of interest for our elementary schools. And this is really great news for our district and our community moving forward. When we were at the meeting this morning, I think Amy said to me that the last elementary renovations that have occurred were 1956. And I will say that the chairman of this board, the state treasurer, Deborah Goldberg, even when she was going through the names of the districts and telling a little bit about the districts, our 1911 building was emphasized and highlighted, and there were a few gasps, might I say.
Correctly quoted from her was 1911. My goodness. That's exactly, my goodness.
And what beat the next oldest school by 50 years, I think, 40 years.
Yeah. So needless to say, I am thrilled. Those of you at this table know how much work we have put into reflecting on our last attempt at a new school. We did form our K-12 educational task force. We've had very skilled, educated, and qualified volunteers on that committee that have helped us learn from our mistakes and really build upon those moving forward with this process. So I'm very, very excited, and I think you all know that from our meeting last week, that when I got the call, I could hardly contain my excitement on Friday.
I'd like to add to that.
Round of
Yeah.
applause.
Really good news.
I'd like to add to that, just to make sure it's said publicly. I think in addition to the work that you did with the K-12 task force and learning from our errors, I think one of the biggest changes in this go-round is the cohesiveness of town leadership and in looking to get this done, and that this is not just a school project. While it's a school building, this really has to do with our town and everything from our leadership to our taxes to our real estate values, right down to obviously the most important, which is educating our kids. But I think that was very evident by the people who were in attendance today. So I feel proud of that.
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
In addition to the work that your task force did over the past few years, and I certainly agree that it's a very well-qualified group of people, I think that the work that you did internally too with the leadership team in the district is showing another big difference this time around than the last project, that this time around, the building isn't being built and then you know, someone coming in and trying to fit into this building. Instead, this building is going to start with an educational vision, and it's a really strong educational vision. And even though we know that since we're working with the MSBA, we're going to be making all sorts of compromises along the way, I think we're all really dedicated to like not compromising the educational vision. You know, so when we have to make cuts and change things here and there, we're just going to keep thinking back on the strength of the educational vision that's been developed over the past 3 years, you know, with the work of the task force to look at, you know, a lot of the other moving pieces. But I think like that part is really exciting too, that it feels like a different project from day one.
And it feels different to me, and it's a good feeling to be in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
It is.
Pam, can you just speak to, so June, you said June 1st to February 2019.
Mhm.
That's when you're working with the MSBA, with the school building authority. Like, what's the timeline, just so people have some idea? Are we talking if this all pans out? Like, are we looking at a school in
Well-
5 years? Are we looking at a school in 3 years? If
I
all
truly
went-
haven't looked beyond the first two modules. Because I haven't gone through all those modules, I don't know what their timeframes are. I would
Okay.
like to say 5 years, but, and that would be barring any unforeseen circumstances. But right now, I'm focused on the 270-day. I don't even recall, I came in at the schematic last time around, I don't even recall how long the feasibility is. And between this morning and now, I haven't had a chance to delve a little deeper.
Okay.
Hopefully, I can provide that information at a later date.
Yeah, no, I think, just think
Well,
of-
but I do want to say, and I learned this after you guys did your tours. It was, you guys didn't say that one of the buildings that you toured was a building that was in the MSBA.
Right.
Went through the same process
Yeah, so there
at
was.
the same
so
time that we did.
Haverhill opened a building in 2017 that they were in the MSBA process in 2014.
With us.
So,
Okay.
right,
it's a
so that was
3-year.
pretty, and, you know,
So our
But that wouldn't have
failed,
been
vote-
aggressive.
but they were at the same place that we were, so their vote was taking place on October 14th. They must have started in 2011 the way we did,
right.
because their vote came
Right.
up in 2014. So 2011 to 2017,
Was the
6
whole
years,
process.
right,
Wow,
Right.
okay.
right.
And how does Clark and Stanley's, you're putting the statement of interest, because I thought it was the middle school? I thought
Um,
that's what
When
was
the
discussed.
MSBA architects and engineers came out and we asked them to tour all 3 elementary schools, they felt those were the next critical needs, the way education is taking place in the hallways
Yeah,
and
okay.
the overcrowding in terms of the lack of learning spaces. So they have encouraged us to put forth a statement of interest for both the elementary schools.
Great.
Very excited. And
It was
I'm going to end on a high note. That's the end
It's
of my
really
report.
good news. I feel like the town's ready.
I think so. I just want to echo what Amy said, that I feel like the last go-round was a school project, and this is a town and community project that just happens to be a building for the school department. I'm excited.
Thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda is Mr. Katz, the school business administrator.
Okay, thank you. We have tonight an update on the current year budget, fiscal 18, and continuation of planning on fiscal 19. We had a committee, budget, called the Budget Committee.
Committee of the whole.
Committee of the Whole, we had Committee of the Whole meeting on the Budget Committee last Friday to spend a lot of time to go through the documents that you have tonight. There's a one-page summary of fiscal 18, and then we have a copy of the report out of the financial software, which is called Munis, that has a lot of detail, which we did go through on Friday, but we don't need to tonight. So we'll give an update on where we were, where we are, and what we reported on last Friday on fiscal 18, and then we'll take a quick look at our projected needs for fiscal 19 as we continue to work on the budget for that. So if you just want to use the one-page fiscal 18 outline that we have, I'll just go through some of the highlights of the Munis report that's attached. And on the Munis report itself, and what we've gone through at this time of year, is we look to make sure that it's accurate, that things are being posted properly, that there's nothing that's that needs attention, and we did find that we had some staff that left earlier this year, departed staff, whose salaries haven't been released, that we have to go in and do. That's a process we'll work on with Town Hall. So a couple of minor reconciliations to do with the money that was brought forward from fiscal 17 to fiscal 18, called encumbrances. Some amounts have to be reconciled, and we're working with the town accountant on that. Several things that aren't reflected right now. When we do the budget and vote on the budget, we rely on other revenue sources to fund certain expenses, and we actually take expenses from the budget and move them into those areas. We have a special education circuit breaker. We haven't moved the $530,000 from the voted budget to that state aid account. We have support from extended day that isn't reflected. We have building rental revenue that's not reflected, and then our school resource officer, the funds that we have in the school budget get moved over to the police department to support that. So those are not reflected, but but they're not reflected on the report, but they're reflected as we review for the balance of all our accounts. And we have a few minor salary adjustments that have to be recorded. So the report it's a sound report. I've gone over it with town hall staff, and we've identified the areas that need attention. So it's a good, reliable report. If you do go through it in detail, you'll see that based on the transfers that the committee voted a couple of meetings ago, basically all the salary accounts have sufficient funds. There's one that we're going to follow up on, I'll mention in a minute, but salary is one of the key things. In terms of things that are, as of last week, in the middle of last week, expenses are hitting as planned for special education tuition and transportation based on information from Martha Raymond, the Director of Student Services. I will add that since the middle of last week when I wrote this, there have been a couple of unanticipated expenses in special education, so the combination of tuition and transportation, we're about $70,000 over budget right now. Last week this time I thought we were pretty much on target, but new enrollments took place and new projections, and so it looks like we're about $70,000 over budget in those areas right now.
May I ask, is that $70,000 over the budget in total, or is that $70,000 over where we anticipated to be at this time?
Total, we projected. What she does, what Mrs. Raymond does, she makes a projection for the year, the total expenses, and when a new student comes on or a student leaves, the bottom line changes. This is
That changed
70,000.
fast.
Well, it takes
Since
one
Friday?
student, it takes us an enrollment in an
Yeah.
out-of-district program and transportation, and you can hit 70,000 very easily. I think that's what happened, either for one or a combination of things, students. So that's 70,000 as a year-end amount. And we're also having to spend a little more time evaluating facilities maintenance right now. We're also double-checking technology, gas and electricity. It's really too early to project. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to look a little bit more at the middle school teacher salary line. It's slightly over budget, and I think it has to do with the number of long-term subs that we have, so I need to double-check that. Areas that are under budget as of right now, unemployment, our initial claims were below projection, and we have had scattered teacher and support staff vacancies, so that money is going to help us in the bottom line at the end of the year when we try to cover some of the areas that are over, so that's good news. We do have a number of areas that are over budget right now. Telephone is over because we had planned to do a system upgrade, and that was delayed, so the savings is delayed. Our substitute budget is actually significantly over due to the number of long-term substitutes, and a lot of times when we have a teacher out on an extended absence, we're paying paid leave for that teacher, and we have a substitute, so we're paying for two people in a position, and we've had a lot of situations like that this year. We're slightly over in custodial overtime, about $20,000 due to a prior year settlement we had regarding overtime. And then this is an example for Hadley special education, special education teacher which was last year was needed when the school year began. Mrs. Raymond in Student Services said we didn't need the teacher, and we started the year without it. It turns out the profile of the students in Hadley has changed since the beginning of the year, so the position that we thought we weren't going to need, now we do, and just hired a teacher, and that's $50,000. So there's some good news and some bad news. We're still evaluating, and it's really hard to project a bottom line at this point. And we're about a third of the way through the year on school days, but we're still have a long way to go. So we'll give you updates about monthly on this as we go forward. So I don't know if there's any other questions or comments. We did spend a lot of time last week on this. Okay, so that concludes fiscal 18. So for fiscal 19, again, this is this is a multicolored one-page sheet called FY19 preliminary planning. We've been using this sheet or variations for about a month or so. What we try to do is, if we're going to be rolling everything forward next year, what's the projection of budgetary need for the school department? And I'll just summarize each section here. We've got 3 sections here, one on revenue, one on salaries, and one on expenses. And in terms of revenue, not knowing what the town increase is going to be, we know that we have to factor in the fact that the Gelfand fund, we're using the last year of revenue to support a position. That's going to reduce revenue by about $78,000 next year. And we're also looking at restructuring the extended day program, which may reduce revenue slightly and increase expenses. So between the two of those, be about $50,000 for extended day. So we may have a revenue reduction of about $128,000. On the expense side, our major source of salaries is through the teacher's contract. That contract is settled, and using a reasonable projection for the other units, we are going to be negotiating 3 contracts this spring for the summer, for the start of the year. Our salary requirements, based on those projections, would be about $750,000. And then we expect we need about another $550,000 for...
Salary increase.
Did I not
The
say that?
salary increases. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I meant to say that. And so that's $750,000. And then on the expense side, we're looking at about $550,000, planning on about $250,000 for special education, primarily tuition and transportation, and then another $300,000 for high-impact program areas. If you remember last year, we had set aside some funds for this, and ultimately we had to add an English language learner teacher, special education teacher, and it was high school science last year. So we're anticipating similar needs this year, a total of about $300,000. So if you add the projected revenue loss, the salary increases, and then the expense increases, we'd be looking at a $1.4 to $1.5 million need if we were going to be rolling everything forward for next year. So that's really the current situation, and that will be evolving as the budget process goes forward.
I just want to continue the conversation of the budget and with the school committee and speak to the fact that Mr. Katz, myself, Mrs. Klondike, Mrs. Raymond, and I have had some conversations that will take place with the broader leadership team tomorrow morning. One thing that I recognize is that 1.4 is not realistic for the operating budget. The general government has been incredibly generous with us the last several years in terms of an allocation. It's not sustainable. We recognize it's not sustainable, and it's time for us to make some difficult decisions that won't negatively impact the education that we're providing our students, but also showing a bit more fiscal conservatism. Tomorrow morning, we have done, at our leadership team meetings, we have done preliminary efficiencies, we've called them, and where we could make some adjustments to find some savings. It's not nearly enough. Tomorrow, we are going into some very difficult conversations with larger ticket items, because I don't expect the town to be able to continue to fund us at the level they've funded us at. So I had several preliminary conversations today, which are some, I guess I would say, creative solutions to finding some savings. And I'm pretty confident with 2 of the areas in which we're going to try to find significant savings. But I just, I feel it's important for the committee and the community to know that we recognize those increases of the last several years are not sustainable. And we will do our part to come in with a bit more reasonable bottom line,
Creative.
creative. Yeah, I'm excited by what we've come up with, and I look forward to bringing you more information at our next meeting.
I think it's encouraging that we're talking about this now, and that we're in the driver's seat, and we're not gonna be scrambling at the last minute saying we're gonna cut this or that, and it's gonna look like cuts to our program, but instead, like, we're trying to find creative alternatives to a lot of challenges we have, and I think that the end result will be that a lot of the creative alternatives, might actually, look okay, or look better than okay. Like, in the end,
I'm not going to do anything that's going to harm our students or harm the education that we're providing. I think there are ways to find efficiencies that I hadn't thought of before, and that I'm okay with and can live with, that will not impact the education we're providing our kids, yet demonstrate that we are being a bit more fiscally responsible.
Can I ask a question? Negotiations, I know
We have-
custodians?
We have 3 units currently. We have custodians, elementary educational support professionals, our ESPs, and we have administrative assistants. They all expire June of 2018. The teacher's contract expires June of 2019, so next year we'd be going into bargaining that.
We've already begun the preliminary discussions with one of the units.
Custodians.
And the good news is that these 3 sort of, on balance, in terms of our larger budget, are a smaller piece of significantly smaller piece of the puzzle.
That was custodians, ESPs, and administrative assistants, right?
Anybody have any other questions? All right.
To be continued, much work to be done.
Thank
Wait,
you.
actually, I do have one quick question,
Okay.
sorry, give me one sec. So in terms of a timeline for, you're having these discussions with your leadership team, we're looking to vote by
February is when
February,
we, yeah.
February something, what is the date, 9th?
I
think
can't
it
remember, the plan that we've laid out was have a draft budget, the first meeting in January, have a public hearing, the second meeting in January, and then have a vote, the first meeting in February. I can't remember the dates off the top of my
In
head.
addition to the leadership team meetings, though, one thing I neglected to say is that Evan and I are having weekly meetings with our town administrator and our town accountant to review some of the actuals from previous years, and also to demonstrate anything that we're doing moving forward. So in addition to leadership, it's a general government school department conversation that's going on as well, and that's happening every week. So,
Right, I guess I just am concerned about, and I know it happens very fast and numbers change quickly. I think I'm just worried about us getting back from break and then hearing of those big ticket items being, in the kind of what happened last year. There was a lot of community issues around kindergarten, when there was discussions. I just hope that we can allow.
I have to say publicly, I don't anticipate kindergarten being on the table this year.
I didn't say, I didn't
Yeah.
mean that either. I just
Right.
meant I was trying to understand our timeline in terms of hearing about these
Well, I would hope it
larger
would be
cuts or
our
decisions.
first meeting in January.
first meeting in
Yeah.
January. Okay.
So that's the second week of January, we're just
Right.
looking at.
And I was gonna ask, when do we want to have another budget subcommittee
We
meeting
could
of the whole?
potentially have that before the next, I believe we should have it probably the first
The first week of
Right.
back.
January.
We'll have our school committee meeting the second week, so
Okay.
we can talk about them, internally, and then talk about them, at a public meeting, even though that is a posted meeting. But, yeah, so I anticipate break, coming right back, getting right into it.
One last question. Capital improvements, we've already conversed with them on their timeline, and
No, it's my understanding that the town administrator has revamped that committee. We have expressed, the town administrator has Mike Scola, Director of Facilities, working on a long-range capital plan. We have some internal needs that we're bringing to Sean on Friday. So those are ongoing discussions. We haven't gone before the CIC yet, and I don't know when that will be. We'll let the committee know, though.
Okay.
Before it's a done deal, I just want to talk about that $25,000 that's for the phone lines. And I know we kind of touched on it briefly in our budget committee of the whole, as well as with the technology presentation that we did in our last workshop. And I don't want it to go without saying that, as we look at new technology, especially with our high school, and we know what can be done, I just wonder if there's a way to sort of leapfrog to the next level and not necessarily upgrade what we have, but I know, Suzanne, you spoke a little bit better about this. It seems like when we hear about, new builds entirely and making better use of the internet and internet calling, $25,000 is such a difficult, it's just such a difficult number to swallow.
Can I interject? I don't think it
Please
is.
do.
I
Okay.
feel like our phone lines are in the same situation our entire technology has been in this district. And we are far behind in upgrading our phone system. The amount of static, poor reception that we get during phone calls, you have to hang up and call back again, is embarrassing. I think that is small money. It's my opinion, it's small money to move us forward when we're here talking potentially about a new building 5-6 years out. It would be money that would be well spent. I think the whole idea of calling one number, that is a school district, getting an extension that you can get straight to the extensions, that's a luxury. What isn't a luxury is the quality of conversations and clarity on the phone lines, and that's just an embarrassment. When you're trying to speak to teachers, when you're trying to speak to your colleagues, oh, I have a poor reception, can you call back? I feel like we're in the dark ages. So it seems like a lot of money, but I look at it that our technology has been way behind. We've done better with that. Now we just need to finish this off with the phone lines. I don't know if my colleagues want to speak to it.
I think that Amy's point, and I agree with that, is that we should ask first if upgrading to our 10 gigabyte like the plan is, right? Does that allow for us to have clean phones without an updated phone system? Because we're not using old-fashioned phone lines.
Well-
We're not talking about phone lines anymore. We're talking about internet
The
connection.
person that's
And-
sitting right there can probably
I
answer.
can answer this.
Can you come down, Vlad, and sit near one of the microphones? I can give you mine.
But Vlad, I also want to be aware and not put you on the spot. Vlad, I just want to make sure that we're not putting you on the spot here in terms of, I know that you hadn't prepared to speak about this.
Good evening. No, I'm ready to answer
Okay.
this question, and I understand your concern. Of course, it's a different option, and like you, Amy, just mentioned about using internet, I understand this. And, well, it's more expensive, because in this case, we need optical cable to be a carrier. So now we're just investing. It's one-time payment, $25,000, just to rewire every single building. So it's all 5 schools will be redone.
So
and
Vlad,
getting
you're
ready.
saying if we did internet phones.
Internet phones, it's completely different because we need to share the same bandwidth if it's internet-based. Now we're using completely different, it's called PRI, primary rate interface. It's coaxial cable, which is not related to internet. It's like different pipe. And it's going to be redundant because we decided to just bring to high school and middle school 2 PRA lines. Just in case if one building loses power, then we can't really get any calls, and we can't make any calls. But in this case, with redundancy, if one building loses power, we have different building. So monthly payment will be much less because Comcast offering flat fee. Without redundancy, it's $489 per month. With a redundant system, it's doubles. But it's still much less than what we pay for legacy copper lines.
For all of the lines.
For all lines, because we have copper lines. And for example, Clark School, I think it's a worse place because they have, it's underground. This cable really sensitive if for instance, after heavy rain, the whole building
Shuts
having,
down. They don't have phone lines.
having horrible static, and sometimes even you can't really hear the voice. Headley School also having problems with static.
They will call us and say, we have no phone lines, so parents can't call in, they can't call out. So in my opinion, this is short money to fix a safety issue.
Madam Chair, just a suggestion. If I'm not mistaken, when Comcast and Verizon provide services, in the past, the town had to give them, there was some type of agreement that the Board of Selectmen or the town manager agreed that they could come into the community and provide services. Maybe we could tie that, any increased fees, to a new agreement if that agreement is up for expiration. I think you'd have that from the tri-chair. That answer. I know they have to provide some services per the agreement.
Mr. Katz, are you aware of,
I'm not familiar enough with the intricacies of the licensing. It's more of a town hall negotiated. I mean, I suppose anything is possible, but I don't know the status of the agreements or what normally gets included or.
But maybe for the next tri-chair meeting, we'll put that on the agenda.
thank you, Vlad.
But you guys are talking about the money that you're spending, Pam, is to actually upgrade, like hardware almost. It's not
Yes.
like a rate, right, of a
But
phone
Right.
or
I
something.
do want to say,
So-
I understand what Suzanne and Amy are saying, is that technology is moving fast, and this seems like a lot of money to upgrade an antique technology when we could be moving forward. I just don't feel like we're ready yet. I feel like we need time, and there's often calls after rainstorms. Vlad just reminded me from Clark on the cell phones that Mrs. Hunt will call me and say, we don't have phone lines right now, and Vlad's rushing to work it, and the company's rushing to work on it, but it's not okay when we have kids in the buildings.
Sorry, I'm just writing down. what you
And this
said.
is gonna actually save money.
It'll save money
In
on
the
the
long
monthly
run.
cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you, Vlad. Okay. Next up, we have our Director of Curriculum.
And there's a presentation, so I believe we should move, unless you want to just look at the presentation on your computer. I can't have this light.
Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give a relatively brief presentation on MCAS as an update. I did give parts of this presentation to a parent forum several weeks ago, so I want to apologize up front to those of you that did hear these slides. I know a couple of our school committee members did hear it already. And so I'm just going to talk briefly about the overview of the spring 2017 administration of MCAS, talk very briefly about the new student performance levels the MCAS results, and what we can and cannot conclude from this data, as well as what the transition plan is for 2019 and so forth. Oh, not what I was supposed to do. Okay, I just want to give a little history for folks at home. Excuse me, in 2015, we took what was called the Legacy MCAS as we have known it for the last 20 years. In spring of 2016, we took the PARCC exam, and in spring of 2017, we had two types of MCAS tests. We had the Legacy test, and we had the Next Generation test. Understanding the Next Generation test. This test is much more rigorous. The reason that we needed a new test is because our last test was 20 years old and it needed to be upgraded and really working with higher level thinking skills. The new test is a combination of the Legacy test as well as PARCC. And it really focuses on critical thinking abilities and really gives a much clearer signal for readiness. This new test was designed with the college and career readiness lens and actually worked with higher ed faculty in all of this. In spring 2017, we actually had all students in grades 3 through 8 were given the Next Generation test in English language arts and math. Grades 4 and 8 actually took it on the computer, and the other grades took it on paper. So I want to speak briefly. This is what we have known as the achievement levels for the last 20 years on MCAS: advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning. And our high school students are still under these achievement levels, whereas the Next Generation has changed the terminology, and it is now exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and not meeting expectations. So there is a change in the achievement levels. This is a really important piece of information. The spring 2017, because it is a new test, is a baseline test. The Next Generation MCAS results cannot be compared to previous years of tests. This is a brand-new test. So as we're looking at this data, I'm going to have some relative conclusions we can draw from it, but there's an awful lot that we cannot draw for conclusions on all of this. So interpreting the results. Now, an important thing that I think is important to note is that we may have some students who formerly were proficient on our Legacy MCAS who are now not yet meeting expectations. They are partially meeting expectations. It does not mean that the students are doing worse. It does not mean that they're learning less. It means that this test is a more rigorous test. They have reformatted the achievement levels to be in line with the national test of NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Proficiency. And on that test, Massachusetts historically is #1 in the nation, or tied as #1, and yet 50% of our kids, even on that national assessment, are at the 50% are meeting expectations, meeting or exceeding. So our new achievement levels are much more in line, comparatively speaking, with our national assessments. If student scores fall in the partially meeting, I've met with every single building administrator, I've met with all the content leads, And we're looking at the students, and if they haven't yet met the expectations, we're looking at, are they really close, that we're not worrying, we're just going to make sure we're spending a little bit more time, or are there some students that actually may need some additional interventions? And those conversations we have had, and each building principal and content lead, particularly in grades 5 through 8, are looking at all of this, student by student. So what can and cannot be concluded from the data? We cannot establish any trends or patterns. And we need for a trend probably about 3 years, and patterns need to be over a period of time as well. So we can look and see if there are any anomalies in the data, and what I mean by that is there something that's popping out of the data that looks to be a little bit different than the rest of the test data. And it's important that we not draw any heavy conclusions, make any major programmatic decisions based on this data, because it is just the first year. And I just want to remind everybody that it's even beyond just academics that we strive for. It's also social emotional learning, making sure things are our environments are psychologically safe. We're trying to build cultural competencies. And some of these can be barriers to students learning, and we're trying to address all of that. So the next generation MCAS results, you will see here that we are primarily above the state for all of these areas, and in reading, quite a bit above the state. Reading is usually traditionally our strength, so I'm confident in saying that though this is a new test, that it is a strength for us because it has been even with the old test. In mathematics in grade 3, it's a strong grade, quite a bit above. Grade 4 is above the state and pretty much all the way down. And traditionally, our ELA scores are stronger than even the mathematics, so we're looking at the mathematics as well. So that was for grades 3 through 8 in math and English language arts. That was the next generation test. We still had students in grades 5 and 8 with science, technology, engineering, taking the legacy MCAS, and we are above the state in those areas. I do want to just call attention to the science scores. We have already transitioned fully to the new 2016 science standards, and the legacy MCAS test was still testing on quite a few old standards. So we've actually moved ahead. I'm expecting these scores to become stronger as the test catches up to us. Trying to be proactive. Obviously, at the high school level, our scores continue to be very, very high, with 98% of our students in ELA being proficient or advanced, 94% in math, and 95% in science, technology, engineering. Ms. O'Connor?
Is that number right, that the state has a 91% proficiency?
It's supposed to be, but I'll double check it.
It just looks like such a big jump.
It does. I'll double check that. This is actually a screenshot off one of the Department of Education sites, but I can double check that. So, as I'm speaking about areas of strength, the areas of relative strength, again, this is a brand new test, but typically what I am saying our strengths are because either we were significantly above the state, very, very strong, or it's in line with some of the trends that we've had in the past, even with the old test. So for grades 3 and 4, grade 3 was a paper-based test. This is important for this distinguishing piece. Grade 4 was a computer-based test. But in both grades, language, the language area, particularly vocabulary, was very strong at the elementary levels, as well as for reading, craft and structure. At grade 3, also integration of knowledge and ideas and key ideas. So those are areas I'm very confident in speaking to. The challenges, relative challenges, I'm comfortable saying, because it's an area that we continue to be challenged in, is writing. And writing is something that we are currently addressing. We are slowly rolling in new curriculum and training around writing, so that is being addressed. For grades 5 and 6, both paper-based tests, you can see that in reading, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and inferencing is doing well there. Vocabulary, again, a strength right through the grades. For grade 7, again, language, reading. You're seeing a common pattern all the way through, so that is well placed in our curriculum. And again, the biggest challenge is writing. So on the high school test for English language arts, again, very, very strong. This district does a great job with vocabulary, key ideas, and writing was actually one of the areas of strength at the high school. So for mathematics, grades 3 and 4, and you're going to see a similar pattern. Number and operations in base 10, which includes place value work, using place value for multi-digit computation, specifically in grade 3, as well as representing and solving problems involving multiplication and division. And constructed response questions, surprisingly, our third graders did pretty well with. That's traditionally a very hard skill, what we used to call open response questions. So for grade 4, again, it's the place value, number and operations in base 10, as well as fractions. Our kids are doing well on building fractions from what's called unit fractions. Unit fractions have numerators of 1. And they work on building upon that. For grade 5, again, number and operations in base 10, you're seeing is a continued strength, as well as all the operations and understanding place value. And then I was pleased to see real-world context problems. I'm really pleased to see that that whole number sense area, that domain is strong for us, because that is the foundation of all of the mathematics that our students are going to be learning. And they need a strong foundation in that in order to be successful in later grades of mathematics. In grade 7, geometry, it was a paper-based test. Geometry, they did great. Grade 8, geometry as well. And you can see the areas, the topics that they did well in. As well as functions. In grade 8, functions really is challenging. I'm not going to get into all the technical pieces, but that's a challenging thing. So the fact that we did well on that, I'm pleased with. And then for the high school legacy, again, 95% advanced or proficient. And again, you're seeing similar patterns, functions in geometry, as well as circles in creating equations. So the biology, again, they did really well. Cell biology, chemistry, ecology. An area of challenge, we had the open response, it's still an open response question on legacy MCAS. We had 5% of our questions for grade 10 on the biology test, the open response questions that were left blank. And so one of our follow-up steps is to really work with the students and encourage them not to leave anything blank and to answer fully all parts of the open response question. There were also a couple of challenges in the anatomy and physiology, genetics, and biochemistry area. So our next steps is making sure we look at our open response questions, all grades, to really encourage the students to answer all parts and really have them working with some anchor papers and really looking at what various scores are for open response questions so that they can strengthen their responses. And then watch the areas of relative challenge. Check when content is taught. I want to make sure that it's being taught in a timely fashion, in time for the test, some of those major areas, and that the standards are in fact, we're having conversations around it to teach to the depth and intent of the standards. So beyond that, we can't really draw any conclusions. Yes.
So this has come up before in some of our school committee discussions about the content is taught to the depth and intent of the standards. Like, so how does that get measured? Like, how do we know each teacher in each grade is teaching the entire curriculum and kids are ready for the next year and ready for this test or whatever? I mean, like, where's that measured?
Where is it measured?
Yeah, like, is it
They
a teacher
have.
evaluation thing? Is it a?
Well, let me come around so you don't have to crane your neck.
It's a really lovely view on camera.
Yes. It's done in several areas. It's done when we're looking at unit tests in mathematics. It's done through walkthroughs as building principals are going through. It's done with, it can be the evaluation system depending on what the teacher's goals are for the year. And then we're trying to watch it on the curriculum end as well.
Can you see it? Can you see, like, okay, so you were talking about not really telling a lot from these tests because of the variety of tests we're taking, but can we see like through the anomalies that there's certain subject areas that kids are consistently not getting? And then, so do we go back and look and see, did the teachers teach this? Is it?
And that's what we're right in the
like,
process
so
of
So
doing.
that's what this is,
Yep,
this is
that's
checking.
exactly what we're doing. And I think it's also important to note that we, for mathematics, we are actually doing a math content review right now and really looking closely at particularly the elementary and middle school math programs as well.
Right, so you know, so when they give you the analytics on every question, you know exactly sort of what content area they're drawing
Yes.
those questions from or what the standard is.
The challenge is Massachusetts used to release a large amount of questions so we could
Right.
really do an in-depth item analysis. Now they're only releasing 5 questions per grade level in each content area. And that's really not enough for us to get into determining was this a curriculum piece or so forth.
So they don't release something that says this is biology, this is evolution, or this is biology, this is genetics, and that, like,
They
they
do
don't,
say that,
and then they don't break down any further.
right. And sometimes it's the way questions are phrased. So it's really, we're doing what we can with the information that we have.
Do you think that that's meant to help teachers not feel as though this is a test of their measure and that this is a test of the kids?
The reason that they're not releasing as many questions?
Yeah.
It's possible. My own thoughts on this, and this is not official, is that this is a new test and they're still building their item bank.
And Maria, so that brings me to what my question was going to be, that if we so desired, we couldn't get, as committee members, copies of the paper tests that are administered to our students?
No.
So they
I
give you
can't
5
either.
questions?
5. It's
That doesn't
nothing.
make sense.
Well, they used to give a lot more questions. I happen to know that part of this is because they're building the item bank.
Makes sense.
That part.
You need to reuse those
And it takes 3 years. It's a 3-year process for each new test question by the time they field test and so forth. So I know that this is part of it. When we took Park wouldn't release questions. We had to get special permission just to get some of them released from Massachusetts. And some of this MCAS Next Generation test are Park questions. So it's a combination of newly developed questions and PARC.
I think it's interesting, so I'm speaking to some students who have taken the sixth, and this was last year, so seventh grade, when they were in seventh, when they were in sixth. I mean, I've never heard before where the kids come back out of the test and say, yeah, I've never seen that before. You know, that was kind of, you know, generally when the kids are taking standardized testings, they're like, oh yeah, I got it, or I
Right.
saw it, I've seen this before, you know, kind of. But this particular year, and I've heard from kids in different grades, but saying that same thing, like, I didn't even know what that was. And these are kids who generally do well, so it was surprising. I was curious if that was gonna be like some sort of a trend, is, you know, because you said this was rated on international standards or something like that.
It's
so-
rated, the way that they have developed the achievement cutoff points is in line with the national assessment. So that when our kids are hitting expectations, they would hit those same expectations on the national exam. So it's really that national benchmarking that they're working hard for. And I don't expect that that would be every year, that that would be a trend, that there's a lot on there that they would never have seen. We are constantly evolving, looking at the data, looking at the curriculum, looking at instructional pieces, talking about how we can do this, and have our kids comfortable with it.
But how does the science standards aren't the science standards released from DESE? So then those are not, I don't
So-
understand how those are not being what the kids are being measured on instead of we've incorporated
Right,
that.
because it takes time. Those standards just came out in 2016,
Right,
and it's a 3-year process to roll change completely over to all new standards. So there's
In
an
other words,
over,
when you get new standards, it's not like they're happening in the classroom the next day.
right, but we did go full force
no, I know
last
we
year.
did, but the state didn't
The state's
actually-
catching up.
Because they have to practice the questions first.
Oh.
Like,
Yep.
But
So-
I think part of like what I heard from kids or from parents about what kids didn't understand, it's not so much the content, it's more like what they were being asked to do is really different in the next
It
generation
is.
test. I mean, some of the things when I went through this like practice test, you know, was about like highlighting this part of a paragraph and moving it here and like doing some of the other things that like you have to use. It's not just like you have to know that knowledge, you have to actually you have to use something from outside,
Yes.
right? To readjust, and I think like that's really, I think that's what was
The
really new.
technology
But
piece.
really new for kids too, to like problem solve during the test instead of just like answer the question.
So.
And that's why it's more rigorous.
Well, in the
Right.
presentation that you gave to the parents.
Yes,
There were a couple of examples. of
Right.
those-
Yes.
just those
Right, like those
And
questions
I have
are-
to say, they were really aggressive. So I would
they
not
were
be
very
surprised.
challenging,
Yeah.
yes. And that is why I shared those questions. There is a lot that our kids are being asked to do. However, they are able to do it. We are just raising the bar. We are raising the complexity of the questions, but they're still in the same standards. Now, for math and ELA, those frameworks were refined, and they just came out in 2017. But most of those refinements were clarifications and additional examples, not rewriting the standards. The science standards were brand-new standards, and they even differ from the next generation science standards that were nationally accepted. Massachusetts put their own stamp on it, so it takes time to shift all the way over to this new test. One other piece I would be very remiss in not sharing is, I have said this before, the technology piece was brand new for our students, but our tech team did a phenomenal job last year training every single teacher, Vlad, Latanya, the whole team, every teacher, every child. And already we've planned for that, because that was just for grades 4 and 8 last year. This year, grades 3 through 8 are going to all be computerized. So we already have plans to train all the teachers on one of our early release days in those grades, all proctors. And then we are going to be doing the training of the students through the library and digital literacy classes. So we're getting ahead of this, and we want to then give students as much opportunity to practice the technology side of things, as well as these new types of questions, question formats. Okay?
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mrs. Kondyke. I do want to emphasize something that Mrs. Kondyke just said, and that is that we have already started meetings around the MCAS for 2018. In fact, I don't know what day it is, but was it yesterday? We had one of our first meetings, and the principals were present, the training team was present. I want to reiterate how our tech team really just, they're like a SWAT team. They come in, they make sure the devices are ready, they make sure the kids are well-educated, the teachers are well-educated, and I think they're a little excited that the 4th and 8th grade have already been trained, so they just need a refresher. They're all hands on deck the day of the administration for any kinds of glitches, but thank you very much for your report. It was
Absolutely.
great.
Okay, next up is the chair report. I'm going to start with our tri-chair meeting. A lot of what we discussed was reflected here in other conversations tonight. Sean Fitzgerald, as you can imagine, what we talked about primarily was budget and budgeting. And one of the things that Sean is talking about, and particularly driving home with his staff, is zero-based budgeting versus incremental budgeting. And I think that they're seeing this, that this is a new process for them. And what we uncovered a few years ago when we had the Collins Center review was that that's actually how we operate. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve there, and I think what's happening, particularly with these tri-chair meetings, and particularly with the work that Mr. Katz is doing with Town Hall, and that the superintendent is doing with the town administrator, is it will be, I hope, very helpful in avoiding surprises as it comes closer to important dates in the early in the new year. One of the things, Mr. Delano, that he was talking about specifically was capital improvements, and that he is looking to change how that's done, and particularly so that we're not looking at things, and when I say we, I don't mean the school department, but the town is really looking at a 30-year plan, and he's working with Mike Scola now on a 30-year plan. And I think what's reassuring to me, not only as a school committee member, but as a taxpayer and just somebody who loves living in this town, is that for the first time in a long time, I really felt like, or feel like, there's long-term planning happening, and that there's, more than a few people who are thinking about what happens to our town 30 years from now, and how do we set ourselves up to be there. So I think that was partly evident by what happened at our last town meeting. I know in my short tenure on town meeting, that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody talk about the state of our finances in our community. And I think that that's happening in earnest in Town Hall. Sean Fitzgerald shared with us a report that he has put together as it relates to tax rates and, what's happening in other towns, sort of even further in depth than what Peter Spellio shared with us. And he's going to be sharing that with us, I think, with the hopes that we take a similar path, and I welcome the help from them to help make that happen. So it was a good meeting, and I think that was it. From there, I want to turn it over to you, Gargi.
Oh, yeah.
So you can talk about some of our plans for our upcoming meetings.
So, I just wanted to remind everyone, so coming up in January, it looks like we have, 2 meetings, the 10th, the 24th, as Evan just kind of outlined, talking about looking at a preliminary budget, and then, I think you said you needed 2 public meetings for that, right, on the 10th and the 24th?
Well, the 10th would be the draft or preliminary, and then public hearing on the 24th.
Originally, we had the athletics workshop scheduled for January 24th. That would be a workshop meeting and not a public meeting. So is there, and I love that when I went to the athletic parent meeting at the high school, that Kelly Farley mentioned to the parents that she was charged with looking at a tiered system. So I thought that was really great that she kind of put it out there. So there was discussion of, us sitting down and understanding more what that might look like. I want to know, A, does that affect this year's, or going into FY19's budget? I mean, is it a workshop that needs to occur so we can look at
Yes.
implementing a tiered workshop? So,
Yes, that would be
so that
part-
would have to then happen potentially by the 24th,
Yes.
correct? So we would want to keep that. And then additionally, Pam, that would be around the same time that we would really want to look at a mid-cycle review.
Yep.
So in order to kind of stay on track, I think we still need to, I know, I wasn't at the meeting where the goals were approved, but I think we're still waiting to look at a final draft of those,
Yeah.
just to get an update on that. And I would be interested in also seeing maybe something from, one of your goals was the school improvement plans, and kind of just checking in with, were there surveys done yet? Or I know that we had given them a longer timeline.
Right, it was
given-
kind of a grace period. I know they've been meeting with their councils,
Okay.
but
But
it
why
was,
don't we include that in when we do
Right,
the
so we
mid-cycle?
were
Sure,
looking for
okay.
something around that time frame. So
Okay.
I know there's a lot that goes on in January, so it does sound important that we do keep our athletic workshop.
Well, so let me ask, because the athletic workshop, we plan to do it as a workshop as opposed to a public meeting,
Right.
so that we could really kind of work through some of the details.
Yes.
However, don't we have to be, when is the second vote required for the budget? Is it that,
Well, it's not really a second vote. I mean, yeah, I think by law, you're required to have a public hearing.
Right.
I think the sequence that we've used, I mean, I was just following prior year's map and what we've done with the budget. We had a preliminary in the beginning of January, the first meeting, and then had the public hearing, the second meeting, and it allowed you to vote on it your first meeting in February. That's the
That's by the
Okay.
charter, too.
time frame, and the charter says that we're supposed to have a vote by
Right.
Is that by the charter?
15th of February, I
Yeah.
believe.
okay, so the vote would be the first meeting of February.
A week between them, it doesn't have to be consecutive.
What was that?
It doesn't have to be like, we don't have to do one meeting, and then the next meeting has to be the second vote. We could skip it. I mean, if there was time, we just have to do it by the middle of the month,
Okay,
vote on it,
okay.
right?
I mean, would
Right.
people be available to have a
An additional
workshop,
meeting?
right, a workshop separate from,
We might need to.
I think we might need to. I know that Maureen, I think, scheduled it with Kelly, right, on the 24th?
yes, yep.
Although I don't see it on our Google Calendar, but I know that through my emails, that's what she wrote.
She's been in contact with Kelly through emails. yeah.
So I don't know if,
But I would imagine that that's also going to come out a lot in terms of what you're working on with your executive team,
Yes.
hopefully.
so.
Oh, it's on
So
there.
what are we saying? So we're gonna add a workshop meeting in January and see if Mrs. Farley can accommodate us then, instead of the 24th, which would then be a public meeting?
if that's the public hearing, that's a bigger deal.
Well, I
Yeah,
thought the public hearing was the 10th.
no, it's the 24th.
No, the 10th is we're gonna look at a
Preliminary
draft.
Draft.
The 24th is a
Okay.
public hearing where the public can come and ask questions,
Okay.
and that's
And by
like a
that
state
point, we
mandate.
would have to already have any ideas or changes, so we
Yeah.
would need.
It happened before.
What are the February meeting dates? We only have one before the 15th? Right?
My just died, I don't know. This computer.
Because we normally do
The
the
10th?
second,
We
we
have
do the
it-
second
It's
and
February
fourth.
10th probably, so,
No. The 10th is a Saturday.
oh,
We're actually scheduled on the 14th.
so that's kind of a bummer.
So,
So we'd have
which
to vote
gives
on it
us
for that.
1, 2, 3 weeks in between there.
14th and the 28th I have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because we've got presidents, we've got February vacation in between there.
So maybe maybe in those 3 weeks, we can do the athletic workshop.
No, I think that has to be before the
No,
public
It would
hearing.
have to be before the public hearing, because if you're gonna
Oh, if you're
implement any
gonna adjust
changes.
any,
Yeah, if you're gonna
24th has
adjust
to be the
anything.
public hearing, but the 14th.
Yeah, I think we-
14th is the vote.
right, I'm just saying, when do we put in the
So it would
workshop?
have to
But
be
they're
the
saying
week of the
workshop,
15th.
if it's gonna affect the money, needs to also be before the public hearing.
Okay.
So you're looking for,
Either before the 10th or sometime between the 10th and the 24th.
okay,
Like the week of the 15th.
okay, week of the 15th, I'll try for. Okay,
Do people need night, or can they do day, or?
I think we should keep
We'll
it the
let,
same, I think
yeah.
I would prefer to keep it the same way, a 7 o'clock workshop meeting. Does that work for you, Gagi?
I mean, yeah, but,
14th.
so you'll, okay, so.
I'll work with
you'll
Maureen
hand-
on that tomorrow. We always meet after school committee meetings to
Okay.
debrief.
So then, and then maybe by the end of January, we'll have a mid-cycle review?
That sounds good.
Does that sound?
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be able to send out the goals before then, though?
Yep.
Right, okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks.
January. All right. So next we have subcommittee reports, and we are looking to you, Suzanne, and policy updates.
All right, so there's a lot on here. So the 10 that we read last time, there was a couple questions on a couple of them that you guys were gonna look over and see if you wanted, what you want to go with. So I'll just go through them and give you my opinions. The first one, bus driver examination and training, we were going to accept that the way it's written, but we were going to delete bullet number 3 and just not comment on the person's high character or whatever. It was
Right.
just,
Correct.
it's just that they had to be, that was redundant,
Mhm.
that sentence. The second one, facility development and goals, that was one of the ones that we could either keep our policy as written, which is on that first page, or as the MASC has written it on the second page. And this one's kind of important especially in lieu of the whole MSBA accepting us, because this is sort of a statement about that. And I'm going to say that the policies, the first paragraph and a half are the same, and then that third paragraph is pretty much where it starts to differ. For one, the MASC policy explicitly says that one of our goals would be to best use local resources. That would be one of our intents, and whenever possible, partner with the MSBA for facilities, which obviously we have, and I don't see any problem with that sentence. And then the third paragraph is much more specific than what we've written. We have that in planning it, we recognize that capital outlays are limited and priorities must be established to make use of building dollar and eliminate overcrowding, and our first objective should be develop a plan that eliminates overcrowding and minimizes the need for, different programming and stuff. And the MASC language is a lot more specific right there, and I think it's better. It says, recognizing that school facilities are long-term community investments, the committee will develop projects that reflect cost-effective designs, are consistent with good engineering practices, and use high-quality construction with attention to current and future technological practices for students, faculty, and school staff. And then it says sites will be chosen, and it sort of delineates some things to look at, availability of community resources and minimizing adverse things. It's just much more specific than we have, and I think it's stronger.
Yeah,
But
I would agree.
I would add, I've been thinking about this, and in the tours we've been taking of new buildings, and then some of the things the MSBA even said today, I think we should add a sentence. And it says, the first sentence says, the committee will develop projects that reflect cost-effective design, of course, we agree on that. Consistent with good engineering practice, yes, and use high-quality construction, of course. And then it says, with the attention to, and then it just talks about current and future technological practices. I would, before that, I would say, with the attention to constructing flexible spaces enough to attend to current and future educational and technical practices. Because I like the idea of making sure we build a building that's flexible for different educational practices, because that's definitely what we don't have right now. And we don't know what those practices are, and I just, in my mind, after hearing all these discussions and visiting things, I just,
That was one of the points that was emphasized. Are you gonna send that? Or do you
yeah.
want- Okay.
No, I'll send this to Maureen, but
Okay.
if everyone, I would
I
like
do
to
agree
add
with
that
that.
sentence to.
So is that something that we'll look at for the next time then, or to vote tonight?
No, I think it's okay, because we sort of
Yeah.
had the first reading.
We
We all
did.
talked about coming together with our comments for this, right?
Yeah, so then,
I
can you
like
just
that.
read it to us how it
Yeah.
exactly would be?
So the facilities development goals, which is policy FA, we will adopt what the MASC policy is, with the addition of, and this sentence in the third paragraph. So the third paragraph will read, recognizing that school facilities are long-term community investments, the committee will develop projects that reflect cost-effective designs, are consistent with good engineering practice, and use high-quality construction, with attention to constructing buildings flexible enough to attend to current and future educational and technological practices for students, faculty, and school staff. Sites will be chosen to meet the educational need, maximize the use of any available community resources, and minimize any possible adverse education, environmental, social, or economic impacts on the community.
I like that.
All right, ding, another one done. All right, naming new facilities was the other one you guys were gonna sort of think about. We could use our policy, which is very brief, or the MASC policy, which is much more comprehensive. And I think,
I like the second one.
Me too.
I like this, I like the MASC's policy.
so the MASC is sort of is more current language and a lot more comprehensive, and it talks about also being able to sort of accept money and some things like that. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's just, seems like,
It
it
gives
seems
a little
like
more,
it's spelled out more clearly than ours is.
I think that especially with what's going to happen in the next 10 years, that this is something that the more declaration there is, the better.
Yeah, and our committee, our policy just says something about naming schools or naming schools and stuff, but this one has like portions of schools or portions of school grounds. And I think I had a conversation with you, Amy, about potentially naming something in honor of someone, so I think like, it just makes it clearer to me. So I think, so I would recommend the MASC unless anyone has any issues with that.
I would agree.
Okay, so memorials, the same sort of thing. Memorials, this is a completely new policy that we don't currently have, that the MASC has. So the only question we had on this one is we just have to make sure, it says school sites should not serve as the main venue for permanent memorials. And like, we all sort of agreed that that's true, that of what we have right now are the main venues for those. And that was the only question, that was the only phrase people sort of had issue with, so I think that one was okay. The equal opportunity employment, GBA, everyone was okay with the changes there to just change the non-discrimination language and reflect new law. The next one was GBED, tobacco use on school property. That's a new policy, that's a newly written language that includes new technologies like e-cigarettes and vapes and things like that. So that's the MASC is recommending schools use this
Right.
to cover all those new products. Hiring staff policy, GCF, was just about changing that language for the non-discrimination language, so that one's good to go, I think. Professional teacher status. Is that the?
Yep.
Professional teacher status, we were looking at taking out the first line because MASC policy doesn't have that line, and,
And subject to satisfactory evaluation.
right, that
I
was
like
enough.
that.
Well,
Yep.
plus
Subject
it,
to
so they'd
satisfactory
be
evaluation.
entitled to this, to the status.
Right, so that's fine, it doesn't, it's just a minor change. Evaluation of support staff. Last time we discussed this, we wanted to go with the MASC one.
Yes.
So if there's any changes, we'll still do that.
Mhm,
Same thing with suspension and dismissals of staff members, we wanted to use the MSAC.
mhm.
The school calendar, ICA, school calendar one.
Yeah.
We were gonna cross out May 1st of each year and just use the word annually.
Yes.
So we didn't have to bog ourselves down with that. The school day, we were okay because it just added that new sentence about if you had to get earlier attendance for some reason. That one was okay, no changes there. Support service, IGB, we were gonna go with the MASC policy.
Mhm.
And in the second paragraph where it says assistant superintendent, everyone wanted to do director of student services, shall be responsible.
Yes.
Yes.
Put that title in there instead. Alright, onward. Instructional programming, there was nothing there, there was just language, a change, a new cross-reference, that was nothing controversial. Oh, and occupational education, that was nothing, we were changing it to include pre-kindergarten, not just kindergarten.
Yes.
And then, so the last one was health education. We're having issues with that one sentence, like, health education will be taught as a separate academic discipline in grades K through 6 and as a separate class in grades whatever. So we were just gonna delete that whole sentence and not even talk about how we were
Yes.
gonna
Yes.
teach it.
Right.
Or we were gonna say.
No,
just in
delete
grade-
it.
Okay, so delete that whole sentence. We're
Yes,
just looking
please.
at that.
Yep.
All right, so that's exciting. So we can just vote to accept all those with the changes.
All right, I'll entertain a vote.
Motion?
I wrote all of them down. Do you want me to read the codes
Yes.
off? Okay. Okay, so I move that we accept the changes made to the following policies, which were codes EE, AEA, FA, policy FF, FFA, JBEA, GBED, GCF, GCJ, GDO, GDQD, ICA, ID, IGB, IHA, IHIA, and IHAM.
I'll entertain a second.
I'll give it to you.
Would somebody like to second that?
I'll second.
Sorry. All right, all in favor? It passes. Yay.
I'm gonna
The
hand that
next
to.
thing, the next thing was a policy we had worked on before, GBGE, which is domestic violence leave policy. We had a question about how we handle domestic violence leave, like is it paid or unpaid, and Darren weighed in. And then, so the sentence in there
Our
now
legal counsel.
on the fourth paragraph, it says, an employee seeking such leave shall exhaust all annual or vacation leave, personal leave, and sick leave available to the employer prior to requesting or taking domestic violence leave. All leave time following the exhaustion of paid time will be unpaid. So that's our policy.
Can I just suggest something under the protective orders? So we're going all the way down to the bottom of the first page.
Okay.
So sometimes an order is confidential, the address of the plaintiff, or it's impounded. It happens frequently.
Right?
So not only to protect the employee, but to protect the district down the road. I don't think that usually you're not allowed to ask what the address is when the plaintiff flees a house if it's impounded or confidential. So I think in regards to, it's a program set up by the Secretary of State, it's the Address Confidential Program, where if an order is issued and the plaintiff requests to the court that the address be impounded from the defendant, that the district does not ask, where are you living? Or it's attached to any documents to protect the employee. And also a copy of the protective order should be provided to, the school where the child is going. A lot of times what happens is the order is granted,
this isn't about a child or a
Oh, I'm s-
family thing.
Well,
This-
I'm just saying on the protective order, we should build in the Secretary of State's program on it.
But I'm saying this is about an employee and our policy for what happens to an employee with a protective order.
Okay.
Like not, so like, it'll be different if there's a student here that can't, that one parent doesn't have custodial rights or there's protective order from a parent, like.
No, I get
this
that.
is
It's just
different.
that if the court orders that the address of the plaintiff is impounded, then no one can
We
ask
can't
questions.
compel them to do
So
that.
do you think does it fit under one of these bullets?
I
Because,
put it under the protective order.
like the very first
The
one,
first
protective
one?
order?
Yeah. So if the address is confidential / impounded, the district shall not pursue any questions, and a copy of the protective order provided to the district.
So at the end of the protective order, we could say unless the court has deemed this protective order,
Confidential
Confidential?
/ impounded.
I mean, something like that after
Yeah.
that? Should we
Check
put
that
that
by
language and then
Darren.
just check with Darren that doesn't change anything or that it's? All right, so Ted, tell me, I should put,
So
So
a
under-
protective order,
okay, under protective order, that's what the one, okay.
if the address is confidential / impounded by the court, the district shall not pursue any questions relative to the protective order.
Looks like we have it. We have that on record.
As good as mine? Just kidding.
And a copy of the,
You lost me with pursue anyway, I'm done.
pursue any questions relative to the order or the address.
All right,
And a copy of the protective order would be provided to the district.
well, that's what we're asking, the employee shall satisfy the documentation requirements. So if the address is confidential and impounded, why would the employee give it to the district? Are we saying,
Because that's when I don't
I
understand.
mean, this thing is saying you have to give the protective order to the district.
Mhm.
But I thought you were saying in the case where it's confidential or impounded, maybe they shouldn't have to give it to us.
Or is it redacted?
Well, it's redacted. It just says, Susan Citizen. We don't even, the police don't even have it.
Huh.
I guess so what else is in the protective order?
Well, it would say custody, visitation.
But you're just, as an
There's certain
employee, you're just
stipulations.
showing
Why
it
can't
to
we
the
just
district to show proof that you have a protective order.
Yeah.
It doesn't
It
matter
doesn't
what's,
matter if it's redacted or not.
it doesn't matter, I guess,
Right, this is just about, like, I think.
I get it on the employee end of
But
it.
I think this
I
is
don't-
just about, like, proof that you are actually taking
Right,
a
you're a
leave for
victim of a
domestic
crime.
violence, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is just saying, just show us your protective order. I guess it doesn't matter if you have 14 things redacted or not.
yeah, I don't think it matters. That's up to the person if they're gonna have it redacted. We don't have to have anything in our policy
Or the
about,
court.
because we're not
But the
pursuing.
district can't ask
But we
what,
can't ask.
No, but we're just saying
But why would we
we're not
ask?
asking, we're just saying we
what
want to see your.
paychecks.
We're just saying we want you to have, we just are saying we
People
need to
are
see a protective order.
For leave. In terms of this is just showing proof.
Yeah, this
Right.
is just showing
This is just
proof.
showing proof. Whether that person then wants their paycheck sent to somewhere, that doesn't have anything, right?
But I think,
Yeah.
but I think that the heart of it is, it's like a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy. Like, it's just saying, like, they'll show it to us, and if there are things redacted, that we can't ask about that.
Right.
Well, we're not gonna ask about anything, because all we wanna see is that
If
you
we-
have it or
yeah,
not.
the
It's like
protective
binary.
order. Yeah,
Do you have it? Yes, check it off. Okay, you're eligible for domestic violence leave,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I think maybe what you're saying is redundant then. Right?
I hear what
I
you're
don't know.
saying. I
I
just
don't
don't know that it has any, I think it's more of a matter of,
I mean, we're gonna run it by Darren one way or another, right? Because it is so.
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay. All right, so we won't vote on that one yet. Yeah, I can definitely.
Seems easy enough.
All right, and then, so the next is there's 10 new policies to
oh,
look at.
yay.
So the first one is IHB. Special Instructional Programs and Accommodations. It's formerly called Programs for Children with Special Needs. Most of these are just changes because, all these policies, a lot of these changes that we're getting are just like taking names of laws out and just saying the law about this, because those things, every time those change, then you have to change the policy.
Right.
So this one is just kind of, this is sort of a housekeeping, same thing here, like just, I think this one, unless anyone has any objections, it's
No.
just taking, changing language to take out
Specifics, yeah.
specific policy names. Okay, the second one is IHBEA, English Language Learners. Again, taking out names, they want you to remove the specific test name for English language proficiency. So same thing there. Instructional materials, okay, this one's a big one. So IJ is instructional materials. Our policy is the exact same as the MASC policy, and I think we're in good shape because we did that review recently. So this policy is meant to replace, is telling us that our next three policies are redundant and telling us to remove the next three policies we have on the books, which is IJJ, textbook selection and adoption, IJK, supplementary material selection and adoption, and the IJM, special interest materials selection and adoption. So those aren't included in our packets because, lucky for you, I looked at them all.
Thank you.
And I read them, and I'm here to tell you, you can count on me, that the textbook selection, it actually does say the same as this IJ policy. You know, I think what's important is that we have regulations, or we have things in place for how we select textbooks, and that we follow these 7 basic criteria, let's say. You know, that we always look at these and you know, biases and all the things we're supposed to look at when we do materials. And so when you're selecting textbooks, could you do those too, Anne Marie?
Absolutely.
And then the next one was like supplemental materials, which is also educational material. So that seems redundant. And so it falls under those same rules. And then the last one is the only one that maybe we have some conflict about. So the IJM is that we're intending to remove is special interest material selection and adoption. And one of the things about special materials that isn't included in the instructional materials, as far as I can tell, like we could maybe add a number 7, is that it says, we could add a 7 that said something about any sponsored material should be subjected to special criteria, such as any expression of point of view should be clearly identified. So this is material that's been sponsored by someone. So if it's like, you know, a drug company gives you pamphlets about something, you know, like a bunch of free resources that maybe we distribute in health class. So any expression of point of view should be clearly identified. Any advertising that appears on or with any material should be in good taste and unobtrusive. And the source of all material should be clearly identifiable. I think that's just a way of making it, you know.
So would you add that into IJ, or would you leave that as a standalone?
I think I would add that into IJ as like one of the criteria for
As
when we're
number 7?
approving
Yeah.
material, we should have a 7 that sort of says that, like sponsored material. So like that's material that's, when I say sponsored, I'm thinking given to us by someone for
That's
free,
what
right?
it
Like,
sound-
you
yeah.
know, donated to the school from some organization. I think we should, you know, those 3. So anyway, the only reason I'm saying that is because these are in this policy, and that's like the only thing substantially I think we lose out of
That's
all 3
different.
policies that isn't in IJ.
So add number 7 to
So-
IJ.
Yeah, so I'll type up a number 7 for IJ for next time, so
Okay.
like we can see like what that changes, and that way we can keep IJ like we have, or we can adopt IJ with the changes and remove the other 3 policies.
Gotcha.
That's the goal.
So we'll be, yeah, so at the same time, we'll be voting to remove the other 3.
Right, right. And then, okay, so, just write add a 7. Okay, so that takes us all the way to
JLA.
JLA, library resources. So this was just taking out the definition of print material, which obviously,
Yeah.
Film strips.
how about microfiche, don't you love
Yeah, I
I mean,
know.
all that stuff, but, you know, we don't need to say what print and non-print means.
Yeah.
No.
And then, Then the last sentence is kind of a weird one. In accordance with the district's policy of providing instructional materials and opposing sides of controversial issues, it should be noted that neither the media center nor the district serve as advocates for ideas expressed in any materials. So this whole sentence was deleted in the MASC policy. So we can keep it in ours, like that we don't advocate the viewpoint of anything or not. It's just, I don't know why.
I say take it out, leave it consistent with the MASC.
I agree.
I mean, I don't think it adds to our policy to say that. Right?
Mhm.
Okay, so,
This
so,
library material stuff has nothing to do with Destiny software or anything. We shouldn't,
No,
right? It
No.
doesn't have any, okay.
okay, let me just delete. Delete. So all these policies, I mean, it's weird that we're going through these like this and like the librarians haven't been consulted on this stuff or we haven't asked for opinions, but I
I felt like we asked for opinions when we
Back when
first did the
we-
review.
Right.
And now we're, like,
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of this
if-
to me
well-
seems cleanup.
Well,
That was
if
like
we had, I mean, we might not have reviewed this policy, we might have just accepted it as it was. But I think like, I mean, I think if it was substantive, I'm trying to just
Justify,
excuse our
right.
behavior for not
No, I
Not
think
we're
this is
changing
getting
fine.
every single person involved in this,
Right.
but I don't think there's anything substantive that we've changed.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it becomes too unwieldy when you get a lot
Especially
of,
when this is run, the MASC is,
has guidance.
right,
they've done a lot of due diligence.
right, I mean, right. Okay, the next one is, policy on, ours is called social networking, we're gonna go to
Social
the
media.
21st century and call it social media.
Okay.
And then, and
Something's
it's,
got to be up to date.
and then, improper fraternization with a student using Facebook and similar internet sites, like we said that way back when this policy was written, so now it's just like, no improper fraternization with social media or other electronic means, like, just
It's cleaner.
leave
yeah.
those more standard and generalized statements.
Yeah.
Teachers may not friend or,
Paula?
follow current students on social media. Now, we had staff before, and MASC says teachers, but I think it should be like,
I think it should be
All
staff.
staff.
It should
I
be
think it'd be
teachers and staff,
it should be, it should basically be any
No, it
adult.
should be staff.
Staff.
Okay.
or
'cause-
teachers and staff. Because if somebody wanted to be really weaselly about it, they could say,
Well,
I'm not a
staff to me is everybody.
Teachers, staff, administrators, I mean, secretaries, custodians, I mean,
Staff
just
is
staff.
staff.
is
Employee
everybody.
of the
Coaches,
district.
yeah, staff, all staff.
Staff is all included.
Okay, because I just think that's important.
Okay.
And on number D, letter D, we had some discussion about this when we first
Yeah.
revised this policy, when Karen and I met with Mike a couple years ago. And we talked a lot about this, how coaches and team members get messages from, I mean, players get messages from coaches, especially captains, like, and they distribute to the rest of the team, and
I mean, that's what's happening.
it's happening, and really, in a lot of cases, I mean, it's just how they communicate. It's like the coaches email or text the captains and say, have everyone here by 2:00, or have this, or have that, and then the
And-
captains
and-
relay.
Is the thought that that's a problem?
Well, all contacts and messages by coaches with team members shall be sent to all team captains or members. So.
They didn't want
That's
anything
why-
being private.
That's
like-
why we did this in the first place. We did send to all team captains or members. So it could just be sent to captains. And MASC doesn't have captains there, but I argue we keep it in there because we are doing that. Like, we're letting
Yes.
coaches send to captains.
Yes.
I mean, that's part of the captain responsibility is
Right.
being
And there's
between
always
the
more
coaches.
than one captain.
No.
No, mostly there is.
Yeah?
Mostly there is.
Mostly, I think our policy is to have at least two, but, I mean, the athletic handbook said that, but, okay, so, and then it said, medical or academic privacy matters, which case the messages will be copied to the athletic director and the school principal. I mean, I think it's just, MASC changed language to the appropriate administrator.
Sorry, because I know, like, I'm goggle-eyed looking at this. Are they, when they're sending those, are they sending them on their personal emails, or are they sending them from the Swampscott School District email?
A lot of times it's
Text.
texting
A
on
lot
a
of times
phone,
it's text.
on a phone.
And that's a
problematic.
That's a tricky thing too, because then,
Well, because it's a school communication and it can't be captured.
Yeah.
that's an interesting point.
So there's no archive of that ever happening. So if there was something to go wrong.
There is no archive of that ever happening on text, you're right.
Because we don't
Right,
provide,
because we don't provide district phones and they're not
Phones.
doing it over our internet phone system.
So like,
I heard that. I may look like I wasn't listening, but I was.
She was just ignoring you.
Just had a frog.
How about, what does Kelly have to say about it?
I really would like her to weigh in on this,
Yeah.
and I consented to it
It's just
because
a tough one.
it
It's
is a hard
just-
one.
I mean,
And I
because
know
let's
even-
face it, kids are not checking emails.
No,
And
they're
you know
not.
what, coaches are, I mean, kids are using text without a doubt for these
Right.
communications. And even when they are using emails, I'm thinking about the girls' old soccer coach, you know, he was emailing from his work address, not his at Swampscott
Right.
address
Yeah.
either, because he was just shooting things off from work, right? So that wasn't even being captured, you know?
That's problematic.
but we have now like, the junior, in the middle school, the National Junior Honor Society, who's the teacher? Hobbs, I think, who runs
Mrs.
it.
Hobbs, yeah.
They set up an app, so all the students, it's like an app, so it's not her personal text
Right,
and
well,
stuff,
that's
but
how-
they're
right.
communicating to all the members
Chaperones, right.
via this app.
Right.
So you're getting all these text communications through the app, and parents were, like, I have it as well, but Priya has it on her phone, right? And then, so I mean, that, and then the fifth grade teachers, like I know Quiet Tech and,
Yeah, lots of
whatever
people, I
Arjun
mean,
has.
most teachers use that
They
for
have like
chaperones.
another Remind Me
Right.
app, and they have all the classroom, so that's a way for everybody to like check.
Yeah, so maybe
there
that's
must be
something,
other
so maybe
things.
that's a way Mrs. Farley can set up communication with coaches and captains or
I
something.
mean, it's no different than Team Snap, right, as parent managers of other
Well, it's
clubs
just,
use
this is
Team
just,
Snap.
well,
It's
this is different because, it's different because it's quick communication between coaches and captains that gets distributed.
It's the
however
same,
they
but you just
distribute.
do it through a different app, you're just doing it through an app and not someone's personal and
but you need it to ding and be seen right away.
right,
They
you can get
they do that?
instant
Yeah.
messages.
Well, you can get notification from
Yeah.
Team Snap, for example.
Yeah, but I
Yeah, I don't
think
know.
you're right, because
I
there's
think
no
we should consult
tracking,
with
and
her.
that's,
Um,
and then are those apps official from the school district?
Right. And what
Or
happens?
track-
trackable
cost
is
us
what we
money.
need.
Well, and what happens if somebody is inappropriate there?
right.
And we've said as a school district, well, it's fine to communicate that way.
Well, I think it just needs to be something that we can track and that we can go back
I
and
mean, because
look
the
at,
next one
right?
says staff will not give out their private cell phone or home phone numbers without prior approval. I mean, obviously, the coach is giving out his private number because that's how he's,
That's happening
that's how
all the
he's
time.
communicating. I mean, I
Most
haven't-
coaches like say, like if you're not gonna make it.
And most
you
teachers
have-
say, here's my personal number if you want to call me.
Well, most teachers don't say that, but some do. I mean, most teachers don't say that. Most teachers
No, I
have
actually
you call
put
the
out a
schools.
directive to the entire district that they're not to use their private cell phones with students. Very recently, I got a little bit of pushback because they don't have privacy. They don't, there's like 2 lines at every building, and sometimes those lines are not in private places where they can have private conversations. So I pretty much sent a directive, and I think I had 2 people push back. One was Mr. Dulett, because he calls the kids to do this. And I just said, I had said to him, just be aware that your phone can be subpoenaed at any time.
Yeah.
But I did send out a directive, November, early November, late October, to the entire district.
I mean, we are saying it can happen with with
Right.
approval of the district.
So I think it ended up
Because
being
of-
3 people that had
Right.
legitimate concerns. The rest of the district has been told, do not use your cell phones.
I mean, there's a lot of schools that operate with school cell phones, like teachers all having school cell phones, and those numbers go out to students.
I
Yeah.
said one of the concessions would be to get each school a cell phone, so it would be one more line to their building, and then they were talking about the poor reception with the cell phones, and that's
But-
where it
but-
ended.
But,
25 grand.
but the app thing is an answer to that, because those phone numbers can be used without, but then again, it's
Then why, I don't
it's
even think
capturing all-
we should talk to Mrs. Farley. I think the school committee should come up with
I think
a
we've
list
got a
of
bigger
apps.
issue.
I think this committee, before this policy is voted on, should come up with alternatives to, alternative apps, I guess.
Well, it's not just sports, it's letter of recommendations, it's,
No, it's everything.
I
I mean,
gue- I
I mean,
guess.
Kenny must use his phone all the time for scheduling driver's ed. He has to be one of those people that
I mean,
gets
I
the.
guess there's nothing to, like, we could approve this and then put this, because it's sort of like housekeeping, but then, put this on larger issues to be discussed and modified over the year. Because this is a big conversation.
Well, all contact and messages by coaches with team members shall be sent to all team members or captains via school lines or via school channels or something.
How do you police that?
Yeah.
I know,
But not even policing it. I mean, your kids are not answering or even looking at email.
I know they're not, but
And we don't have, and all of our teachers don't have a school phone that they can text.
well, I don't know what the answer is.
I don't either. But that's why I say, I think that, like, if we leave this particular, or if we make some of the updates as recommended, which are pretty bland,
Right.
but then put this on our radar for updating and discussion with, legal.
All right, you know what? Okay, let's just put a big hold on this one, and I'm gonna circle these two, and I'm gonna call Mike and ask him what
I
other
was gonna
districts
say,
do, like what's different.
What are other people doing?
Like, has
This
anyone
can't
else
be only
had
us.
this, has
Yeah.
anyone else thought about not being able to capture public records
Have
kinds of
you,
information?
have you shared this directive recently about teachers not,
I have not
Friending
reminded
or
them of
following?
that. I can definitely do that.
I think their reminder should be in order?
I can do
I
that.
mean, in my family, my kids are friends with teachers, but they've only become friends after they've graduated.
Yeah, right, that's different.
So, right, like, that's, like, I haven't,
I can tell you some seventh graders.
well, I see them looking at Facebook and trying to look at things that are public, but no one's in,
Yeah.
I see them, I'm
I
trying,
know Instagram that there is some,
I'll send a reminder.
yeah. Okay, so, that one's temporarily on hold. Six, okay, so field trips, that last line, so field trips is our exact same policy, except for that new bullet at the end, say, all trips, allow student access without regard of family ability to pay. So we have to offer it and figure out a way to,
Where did that come from?
it came from MASC's
Is that like
policy.
We offer financial assistance. We don't always pay for the entire,
But we allow everyone access to it.
right?
Everyone's allowed to go on the trip regardless of your ability to pay.
Well, I don't
Well,
think
not
that's
some of those
true.
big expensive
But
ones
not-
where they
do they
go
have to pay the
to,
whole-
Washington.
No,
Washington
Washington,
Nature's
like-
Classroom.
Washington, they pay, I think we offer financial assistance by paying a third of it. But,
Okay, let me ask if that's a
yeah, I
law.
mean, what
and
about trips
there are
to South
times when there are
America?
scholarships, but like Washington trip, this came up recently. If you are unable to go, there's fun opportunities here at school, so it's not like an educational requirement, it's an extra. So I'm talking about I think I'm focusing on the bigger trips versus
Okay.
just a day trip that we would obviously allow kids to go and find a way to
Okay,
pay.
so I'll call about
Okay.
that one too.
Because
Okay,
there's no legal reference under it, so.
yeah, you're right,
implying
nothing,
that-
you're right, nothing was added to that.
We don't have the budget for that.
Cutting off field trips, that's on the agenda. Kidding.
All right. The next one, just change the language to update community resources instead of human resources, which didn't even make sense. So IJOB, there's really nothing there. IK, academic achievement. All right, this one's a weird one. So our policy, IK, academic achievement, doesn't actually exist. The policy that on the next page, the IK, student progress report to parents and guardians. That's actually, we have that policy, we just call it IKAB for some reason.
Oh,
We have that exact same policy.
So it's just
We just
reclassifying it.
renaming it, yeah.
So we need to call our policy IK, and now we need to look at the policy we currently call IK.
So we need to get rid of one and.
So
Or
they're
replace.
both really similar. They're both about, you know, kids getting
Oh.
report cards and, you know, keeping parents up to date on grades and things like that. So I think both of you guys, we should read this when you have more time, read them both. And if you want to keep one or the other, we should just pick one. If we want to combine them and make our own new IK.
Okay.
But if you look at it, when you look at it, you'll see that it's a lot of the same stuff.
It also has that language in
I know, that
our
judgy
original that is,
stuff, right?
that, yeah, very judgy.
I
But
know.
we're, progress is happening in the middle school, but this doesn't happen in the elementary, right? You're getting a progress report in the middle school before you get your term one grade, but when you think about it, this doesn't happen in the elementary level at all.
But-
So it's kind
But
of
aren't progress reports the same as,
no, it's not a report card,
Like
right?
a midterm.
but I know
progress
that's how
report.
we're using it, but as a policy, is this about one thing versus another? Or is this about report cards?
Progress report is something entirely
Well, this is
different.
about how we keep parents informed of how their kids are doing. So this talks about progress reports and report cards, so.
I'd like to read it a little bit
Yeah.
further.
I'm just saying, I don't think it reflects elementary at all.
Like, you'll see, you'll read it and you'll see that it's the same, but maybe the wording could be, maybe we can make one policy that's a little
So it's one
stronger.
versus the other, or
Well,
both?
It's one versus the other.
Yeah,
Probably-
they may be
probably
using the
combine
term,
some things
yeah.
from the first one into
Okay.
the MSC one. Okay, so, oh, and also, the end of that policy, IK, we say something about the assistant superintendent. So whenever it says the assistant superintendent, am I normally substituting director? It's on top of the next page, after
In this case, it would
IK.
be
Here's the director of curriculum
Curriculum
and
instruction?
instruction.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanna stick that in there. Okay, the next one is, Swampscott High School graduation requirements. So what the difference here is, the whole policy isn't written here, but the important part is that our policy has every single graduation requirement, and the MASC policy only has, the state minimum graduation requirements.
I
Like, it's
think
like
they should have ours.
Yeah.
90
Right.
Right.
120 credits.
Right.
Right.
So we should keep it as it's written right there, everything, even what's in pink highlight, we should keep, except, and we should change the wording, instead of social studies, we should like hit history or social sciences. Change that wording, but also, I just wanna double check, like, we have 4 years of math, right?
Yes.
That's our requirement, 4 years of math, and then everything else I think was correct. And then when you look on the bottom 5, our requirements, like, do we still call it contemporary adolescent issues and adolescent issue 2s and expository writing in 2? Like, I think if we're gonna write those, we need to write them the right way, so I don't even know what they're called.
We'll have to check.
So we just need to double check that those,
Temporary adolescent issues.
right,
Is that a fancy word for sex ed?
right.
I thought you needed more than 2 years of a world language.
No?
Nope.
Okay.
And that's new in my lifetime at the school, that it's even a requirement for 2.
They, at a presentation some parents made, they said that more was required, but that was a,
And also, I think that last paragraph, on the top of the next page, it's in pink, other requirements may be established by the school administration in relation to the particular programs. That's new, we don't have that in our policy. But I think we should, because we have we have other graduation requirements. For example, if you want a STEM certificate or a global competency,
Right.
there's other graduation requirements.
I like
So-
that paragraph.
So I think we can put that paragraph, we can include that paragraph. So I think for this policy, all you need to do is just, I'll clean it up so it looks like, what it should be, and then if there's any differences with what those courses are called.
Yep, we'll look that up.
I could have looked it up, but I just.
Yeah, but,
Lazy.
Okay, the last,
Right.
is this the last one? No.
No.
Assignment of children to school, JCA. That last sentence is in the MASC policy, and it's not in ours, and I wasn't even sure it's relevant because we only have one secondary school building in each. So it's not like they're not taking courses offered in science schools, but apparently I guess that can cover dual enrollment.
well, then
or-
we'll keep it for dual
Yeah, so we
enrollment
can just, we
purposes,
can
yeah.
put that in and just say like North Shore Community or, you
Yep.
know, even if they're going to another school or whatever.
Okay,
So we can just put that in there.
Thank you for crossing out, or an exceptional child is involved.
Yeah, isn't that weird? There's a couple places where it says that, and then it says hardship instead, like so it's sort of a more,
No, I think that's for kids who might be accelerated.
or the other end of the, because the next policy, I think that coming up is exclusions and exemptions from attendance because of expulsions, but,
Huh.
okay. So that policy, I think we pretty much have that one covered. That one's fine. The next one is entrance age.
yeah,
So
this
we had
one,
some discussion whether it should be before September or prior to the first day of the school year.
but we use September 1st as the
And we
cutoff.
should just use that anyway, because I was talking to Mike and he was saying, you know what, if you start doing it before the first day of school, then you have to always think like, what was the first day of school?
Yeah,
You have
no,
to
no,
go back.
no, no.
So,
I would like it changed to September 1st, and I do not like what the MASC has. The admission of children whose birthdays fall after the first day of school will be solely at the school's discretion.
Yeah,
I
no.
don't know what the purpose of that is, so,
That's
So we
to,
should
that's
just
to
not
let
even
people
open
in
that can of
early
worms.
if you want
yeah,
to.
no,
okay.
I'd like to stick to that September 1st deadline.
Okay.
We adhere to it all the time.
So the only change to that policy will just be to take out that, that regulation that
Okay.
they tell us to cross out.
Mhm.
Okay, school admission. I mean, the only thing is the word registrar, which seems unbelievable to me.
Well, we do have one.
Yeah, we do have a registrar.
I know, but it's funny, we're just changing from a principal to registrar, and this is a
Right.
whole policy change we have to vote on. It's kind of dumb. Okay. JHD exemptions, exclusions and exemptions from school attendance. So our policy is the same, except for MASC doesn't have that sentence that is in pink in our policy that says, having been expelled during the same school year from the district or any district in the Commonwealth. Like, they don't have that.
Okay.
So I don't really know. We have that, but MASC doesn't have that. And honestly, would we not take a kid in this school district that was expelled from like a school in Lawrence? Would he?
Wouldn't you have to?
Well, this says we don't have to take someone that was expelled during the same school year from this district or any district in the Commonwealth. Like, I don't even understand how that's possible.
I don't know where that,
Well, if it's a felony charge, then they're under,
But then it's
if
gone
it's on school
beyond,
property and it's a felony charge, then they're out of district.
well, but then it's gone beyond the expulsion, and it's about, then it's in the hands of the state.
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea.
can you ask Mike about that?
So should I ask if this is a law?
Yeah,
Because aren't they entitled to a hearing with you?
well, this has come up before that
Bless you.
districts have students with felony charges pending. We have to educate everybody, so I really am curious where this came from, where the wording came from, and
Why
whether,
do we have this in our policy and they don't?
right.
But also, it's just like, it just seems like,
If somebody moves to this district with a kid who's been expelled someplace else, by law, don't we, you have to
I don't
educate
know.
them?
That's what we're gonna find out.
Okay.
That's my
And why would it just be
understanding.
in the Commonwealth? What if it's someplace, New Hampshire?
Because maybe you have to take it from another state, because maybe you don't have that information.
You wouldn't even know, yeah,
Seems crazy.
it does seem.
I don't know, it's time to go home. Okay, last one. Last one, drum roll. Okay, this one's easy. This is drug and alcohol. We already, this policy we've already looked at, Karen and I, like, and so we're up to date, but it's just about,
Yep. School-sponsored.
school-sponsored event, instead of just functions that are at the school, any school-sponsored event is added to this. And then the next one is JICG, it's just like about tobacco only, and we're gonna remove that one because now tobacco is in,
That
this
previous
policy.
one. Okay,
Yeah, so just having a tobacco-only policy is redundant.
all right.
Anyway, it's easier than I thought it was gonna be to go through this.
Thank
So I'll
Give you a
make
lot
those
of credit,
changes.
Suzanne.
Suzanne, I thank you.
Huge props.
I am grateful that you go through these with such rigor. Okay, well, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
We have a consent agenda?
Oh, shoot.
I thought you were gonna say something.
All right. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the district. The school committee may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any committee member, any items can be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. Tonight, we have 3 things. We have the regular session minutes from November 8th. We have field trips, the IRC going to Philadelphia, and we have warrants number 1819, 1820, 1821, and 1822. Could I have a motion?
Make the motion.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Are there any discussions?
So what is the international relation people doing? International
It's
Relations
like a- It's
Club,
like a
right?
model
Club.
Congress thing.
It's
in
model
Philadelphia.
Congress,
I
okay.
mean, yeah, something like that, where they pretend to be different nations and take a trip every year.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Shall I call a vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Now I'll take a
I move to adjourn.
movement to adjourn. A second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.